Our next keynote speaker would have loved to be with us in person as well, but due to the circumstances, it's not possible to be here physically, but she's definitely going to give us some food for thought. She's a fascinating role model who speaks Maori and English and has been recognized with numerous awards in her fight towards a more diverse and inclusive world. You may look forward to our keynote by the wonderful journalist and activist Oriini Kaipara.
E ngā mana, e ngā reo, e ngā maunga whakahi o tēnā whenua, o tēnā iwi, tēnā koutou katoa. Greetings to you all. My name is Oriini Kaipara. I am Indigenous to Aotearoa, New Zealand, an island nation in the Pacific with a population of around 5.5 million people. My people, Māori, make up around 875,000 of our total population. My language, Te Reo Māori, is one of only 2 official languages in my country. The other is the New Zealand Sign Language. I am a mama, a mother of 4 beautiful Māori children, 2 of whom are in their 20s and one is in his second to last year of high school, and my youngest is eager to be double digits. She turns 10 in August. Most people recognise me for my role as a television broadcast journalist. I am the first person in the world to anchor a national primetime news program. My Moko Kauae, the traditional chin marking reserved for women of Māori descent, has made a lot of headlines in the last 6 months. But I've had it for more than 3 years. She represents my whakapapa, my heritage, and my ancestry. She's a depiction of all my tipuna, my ancestors, and is my connection to my past, my present, and my future. Moko Kauae is personal, and it belongs to the individual. The individual is a part of the collective. In this respect, I wish to share who I am and what connects me to my culture through my pepeha. Anei te hono ki taku ure tārewa. Ko pūtawa ki te maunga, ko rangitai ki te awa, ko mātātua te waka, ko kokohina o te marae, ko te pahipoto te hapu, ko ngāti awa te iwi. Kia whakawhiti atu ki te moana o taupō nui a tia, ko tōna riro te maunga, ko taupō te moana, ko te arawa te waka, ko waihi te marae, ko te heuheu te rangatira, ko ngāti turu mākina te hapu, ko ngāti tūwhare toa te iwi. Whakawhiti atu ki te ukai pō o tōku whaea, ko pūtaua ki te maunga, ko tarawera te awa, ko hāhuru te marae, ko ngāi tamarangi te hapu, ko ngāti tūwharetoa te iwi. Kai kanohi atu ki te urewera, ko puke nui ora ho te maunga, ko tauranga te awa, ko mātātua te waka, ko tātai ahape te marae, ko ngāti raka te hapu, ko te paupāpaka te tangata, ko ngai tūhoe te iwi. I've just recited my ancestral connections to my ancestral lands, rivers, mountains, canoes, marae, sub-tribes and tribes. As Māori, this is truly how we define ourselves as Māori. Okay, so I grew up in total immersion Māori education. I was born into the Māori language movements of Te Kohanga Reo and Te Aho Matua. Te Reo Māori, the Māori language, has always been my first language, but I have struggled over the years to maintain it, not because I can't or couldn't be bothered speaking it, but because there's a great shortage of speakers. While I said earlier Te Reo is one of 2 official languages in New Zealand, it's only been that way since the 1970s. Prior to that, it was deemed a lost cause and pretty much frowned upon. In fact, past governments enacted laws that would see Te Reo prohibited from being spoken at schools or basically in any public space. To this day, we continue to fight, and my purpose is to be a part of the reclamation of our identity as Māori in all its authenticity, and to ensure that my language doesn't become extinct. Over the last 18 years, I've carved a career in television, largely as a broadcast journalist. I've always loved entertaining, but I thrive on learning, writing, meeting people and championing for those whose voices go unheard or whose stories remain untold. For the last year, I've been a newsreader with one of the main TV channels in our country, 3, which was recently acquired by Warner Brothers Discovery. I love my mahi. Mahi is the Māori word for work. I've had the honour and privilege of meeting so many different people, but the most memorable are the elders, the kaumātua, and people who have since passed on. The leaders of yesteryear who have played a huge role in helping me to get to where I am today. So I want to thank the organisers of the Art Directors Club for inviting me to speak at this year's conference, all the way from my home country, from Aotearoa, New Zealand. What does creativity mean to me? Creativity means freedom of expression. I don't mean freedom of speech, I mean the creation of something from one's imagination or ideation of life through a chosen craft. That craft or form of expression is the vessel to realising one's idea. Wikipedia reckons creativity is a phenomenon whereby something new and valuable is formed. The created item may be intangible, such as an idea, a scientific theory, a musical composition, or even a joke. Or it can be tangible, a physical object, like an invention, a printed piece of literature, a TV news report, or even a painting. I guess my interpretation falls into that definition of what creativity means. It reminds me of a whakatauki, a Māori proverb. This one has been coined by a leader in Māori philosophy, esoteric law, customs and traditions of my people of Tūhoe. Sir Pou Te Mara is a leading academic who came up with the phrase, koi te matapunenga, maiangi te matapu iho iho. The English translation is see the invisible, touch the intangible, and do the impossible. In this sense, I believe creativity is an inherent part of Māori culture. Our traditions and histories were originally passed down through oral records. Our ancestors retained our ancient knowledge systems through karakia or incantations, through song and prose, through oratory customs that we still uphold in our Māori communities to this very day. Here's an example. Takura kauae, taura wa ki te whare, ka ngaro atakahi e, te whare o te kahi katoa. Hei ngau whakapai e, hai whakapai ururoa e hau mai nei, kai waho kai te moana, ka hore aku mihi e, aku tangi moko utou, mau puku ko te iwi e, ka mōhai tonu te whenua, e tako toho nei. This mōteatea, this lament, it was composed by the late Mihi ki te Kapua. She was also from Tūhoe, and she composed it in about 1873. She was one of the most renowned and prominent composers of her time. Skilled in the art of composition, Mihi ki te Kapua was an expert in all the techniques of composition, an exponent of compiling words so that they were correct and that the clarity of thought would emerge. She was also skilled at placing the lines of songs to build up the exposition of her ideas. This song of hers is well known. and it's still sung to this very day, not just by her own people, Tūhoe, but by people of many tribes in Aotearoa. You can say it's a tribal anthem. There are a couple of explanations for this particular lament, takurako. One is that Mihi ki te Kapua went searching for her husband Hikuwai. He was killed in a battle when their people were attacked in the 1820s by outside tribes, Māori tribes. She was widowed and left to raise their many children, who eventually grew up and left their homes. It's said that Mihi ki te Kapua took shelter in the house made of manuka or kahi katoa, which are native trees to Aotearoa. This house was like a sanctuary that protected her from the ill winds that blow from the sea, a metaphor for the war parties from coastal tribes. It was also a house of mourning. Mihi ki te Kapua cried until her tears ran dry, but while she could no longer shed tears, her sorrow ran deep for her people slain in battle, lost to the land of which she remains all alone. This song is an example of a centuries-old tradition of chanted song poetry. Chiefs and leaders would often compose as an important way to communicate ideas. Sometimes our tipuna or ancestors would compose chants or incantations, karakia, to evoke the spirit of our gods and spirits. It's said that gods and tipuna could express themselves in the world through music and the human voice. One thing that I don't often talk about is one of my childhood passions. I used to compose when I was young. In fact, I wrote a few songs that were performed by some of the country's top Māori performing arts groups, as well as some of my Māori music mates. I stopped around the time I started having children because I lost the passion. And I started overthinking and over-analysing every single word and thought that I had at the time. So in essence, I believe I killed my own creativity with rationality. If you ask me what's the biggest enemy of creativity, it's just that, overthinking. More than anything, it's fear. Fear of being judged, fear of being ridiculed, fear of writing the wrong thing, fear of losing popularity, the list goes on. I've composed maybe 1 or 2 songs since, nothing like I used to produce as a child. It's funny that how as a child we have less inhibitions and are more carefree, but in adulthood we create barriers that restrict our freedom to express. We do it to ourselves. Perhaps it's that I've transferred my passion for writing into a career instead, and that's journalism. Writing real stories about real people facing real issues in today's real world. It's not the same, but I believe my mahi is making a positive difference in the lives of many, including my own. What do I want creative people who implement their projects on the topic of diversity to think about? It's a big question. My message to creators out there creating anything about diversity is to be inclusive, not exclusive. Don't write about people you haven't spoken to or included as part of your project. It's important to have a recognised or designated advisor from whichever culture you're speaking of as part of your main production team or sitting side by side with you as the creative master of your idea. Our stories are just that, our stories, and I believe they must be told by our people, or at least have a major stake in the direction in which our stories are portrayed. One recent example of this is the latest Air New Zealand safety video launched a few weeks ago. The project is steeped in Māori culture and draws on Māori ideologies, legends, customs, language, and our unique view of our environments to carefully craft its safety message for manuhiri, for visitors coming to our beautiful country. While passenger safety is crucial, the company went a step further by placing culture at the heart of the video, with sustainability the underlying theme. This is called the Tiaki Promise. Tiaki is a young man who ventures across Aotearoa, New Zealand, with some of his mates, his friends, on a wakarererangi, a flying canoe. And they go to visit the guardians or kaitiaki of the world, including Ranginui, Sky Father, Papatuanuku, Mother Earth, Tāne Mahuta, God of the forests and of human life. And they also visit Tangaroa, God of the oceans, the lakes and the rivers. It's the first time the company has done anything like this, in fact any major company in New Zealand. So while it's received a lot of praise, especially amongst Māori, from Māori, it's also drawn criticism for being too focused on culture. You know, there's just no way to please everyone. Me personally, I love it. It's the first authentic piece of work, I believe, that I've seen and felt drawn to in a very long time. Why? Because it's me. It's about me. It's including me. It's reflecting me. And that shows my heritage is a powerful one, it's a spiritual one, and it's an enduring one. As an Indigenous woman, I feel it's acknowledging me and my people as an essential part of these lands. I don't believe New Zealand could have achieved their objective fully if it wasn't for the Māori personnel they included at every stage of production. They had Māori advisors from around our country contributing to the narrative, to the storyboards, to the set designs and construction, to the actors, to the production crew, the list goes on. And the thing is, they listened. They listened and respected the views of each and every person involved. That's admirable, and that's Māori, to foster a collective approach as opposed to an individually driven outcome. Now, when I reflect on my own industry, television and even the film industry here in New Zealand, we're still playing catch-up. In fact, we're far behind the eight ball when it comes to diversity, especially when it comes to fair representation of Māori in mainstream media. The scales are still unbalanced, where Māori stories continue to be relegated to the end of news bulletins, if they're lucky, or they'll throw away bylines that not many people notice because you actually have to fish around for them to even know that they exist. These are the good or success stories about Māori. What still gets featured and noticed are the negative stories about us. Diversity is something New Zealand is still working on, but the upside is progress is being made. I guess I can attest to that. I'm the first person in the world with a traditional facial mark to anchor a national news program. More than that, I'm an Indigenous woman, fluently bilingual and unapologetically Māori. My first anniversary at News Hub is coming up. It's this month, in fact it's in a couple of weeks, and I'm pretty proud to say that I've not just anchored my own daily 4:30 news bulletin, but I've appeared consistently across every news program we have, including the 6 p.m. prime time bulletin. Despite the persistent complaints from some viewers, not many, who feel aggrieved at the sight of my face or at the sound of my Māori language when I greet them with a formal welcome in my native tongue, my producers and bosses are so supportive, very caring, and even understanding, so much so that they keep putting me on while telling some of these viewers to switch the channel. That's a huge shift, especially for any mainstream media provider anywhere in the world. Rewind 20 years ago and I'd be on the chopping block for sure. Or worse yet, I would never have had made it on air, either as a presenter or reporter, just because of this, just because of my Moko Kauae. It takes a lot of courage and strength to take the hits, but to also be the change. I say this with regard to my organisation as well as the audiences we communicate with every day. I believe that while there's resistance to my being on their television every day, there will come a day where people accept my cultural difference, not as a threat, but as a welcome guest in their homes. I'm really hopeful. And that leads me to my second piece of advice, probably my last piece of advice for everyone. The clock's ticking. Be fair, be real, and be authentic. Don't steal anyone's cultural ideas, their culture, their ways of living, their histories, their stories, or anything belonging to them that's just downright wrong and rude. Simply ask. I've been criticised for speaking out against artists who felt inspired to draw or paint my portrait without my knowledge and then sell me online without even the courtesy of letting me know or asking for my permission. A few have just done it, and when confronted about it, not just by me or my whānau, my friends, people who know of me or who know me, these people either get really defensive and turn the situation on its head where they become the victim and I become the perpetrator. It's really bizarre and it's disrespectful. What I've learned through these experiences, though, is that anger doesn't negate anger. Fighting fire with fire leads to an inferno. So the only way forward is to educate so that people can understand, and to always come from a place of empathy, of aroha. Aroha has so many meanings, but ultimately the translation would be love, compassion, empathy. People only know what they know, and they don't know what they don't know. Often I'm having to explain or share insight of my culture and the origin of moko. The thing is, I'm not an expert. I don't think I am. It's just that I live and breathe it. I'm learning through experience each and every day. And that doesn't make me an expert. It makes me a lifelong learner. A Māori proverb that dates back to the origin of this taonga, this treasure, moko, is whāia ngā mahi o rarohenga. Strive to be better than average. The way I interpret this whakatauki as a wahine mau moko, or a woman with a Moko Kauae, is to strive to be my very best by doing my very best all the time. It doesn't mean that I must be the best, but it acknowledges that I'm human. And I'm a human born into a world where I will be challenged, where I will fall, but I must rise. And when I do rise, I rise to be better than the person I was when I fell. I've gone off on a tangent, of course. I'm supposed to give you guys tips on how to best include diversity into your projects, which, to be honest, I think I have covered. I googled the meaning of diversity and two explanations popped up. First, the state of being diverse, variety. Second, a range of different things. Oh, actually, there's three. The third one is the practice or quality of including or involving people from a range of different social and ethnic backgrounds and of different genders, sexual orientations, etc. I believe we all have a part to play in making our future a better and safer place. As creatives, we all have the power to define that future, whether it be good or bad. I ask that we strive towards good, if not for this generation, then for generations to come. Once again, I'd like to thank the organisers of this year's event for inviting me to speak, and to all of you listening and watching. Thank you for your time, and I hope my words serve you well as you embark on the next stage of your journeys. Kia tauwhirotia koutou e te wāhingaro, kia tūturu e rangi, kia tūturu e papa, ka whakamaua kia tina, tina, hui e, tai ki e.